life living and making a living can sometimes wear you out, grind you down, and dull your senses. So, for a keen mind and a sharp contributive edge that will give you a better chance of success and happiness, take this time out to sharpen your axe. Stay with us right now for Life Talk.
Hello, I'm Gina Fitt, and you've either surfed to or purposely selected Life Talk with Vern Moses. Welcome to another in our series of ongoing verbal essays brought to you in this television format. It's a pleasure to have you with us today. Vern, last week we were talking about criteria for success, and I think there were 6 different points that we wanted to cover. We didn't have time to go over everything in the last show, but perhaps we could recap quickly for our viewers the 5 points that we did cover last week and include the 6th. I think it was a fascinating discussion and well worth the review.
It's always interesting because there's something absent on this particular list that you normally expect to find, and perhaps if we can recall, we'll go back to it at the end. But in the event that we wouldn't, let's do it now.
Okay.
In a criteria of success, one of the things that's not on here is results. In other words, we don't talk in terms of results. But I really believe that if you give yourselves, your company, your family, your community, your country, and your God, these things, you're going to get as many results as you could possibly hope for. You know what I mean? So that we can focus on these things, that in turn would give us the results that we intended. All the way through this thing, we've been looking askance at results orientation anyway, and really looking to the process. And if you can find your pleasure and your pride and your power and your productivity in the process, you're going to be a whole lot better off. Now, like you say, we had several criterion, one of which was time consciousness. Yes. And these were kind of like refutations of the normal languaging. See, normally we talk in terms of time management. And I'm uncomfortable with that, always have been, because you don't manage time. Seconds a second, minutes a minute, hours an hour, nothing going to do about that. People say, well, that's just semantics, and I say, yes, exactly, that's what this is all about. It has more effect on who we're becoming than vocabulary does.
Absolutely.
So they say, well, utilization of time, and I find that time consciousness is a dimension beyond that. And if people would like to review the show, possibly they could call in and we can make arrangements for them to see it at a later time, or get them a copy to it. A lot of this is making lists, knowing what you must do, should do, and would like to do, and put them in their proper sequence. A lot of it is predetermination. In other words, chunking your time into small, manageable segments and predetermining what you're going to do with it, evaluating the effect that's going to have on your long-term result, acting on it right away, knowing that it was the right thing to have done. We identified that as a peak experience. And so becoming aware of time is part of the key. And then we talked about integrity very briefly. And we went beyond honesty, authenticity, and candor to structure and flexibility, the kind of integrity that you find in a building, a plane, or a ship. I don't know if we spent a lot of time on adaptability, but by using life formula that we've discussed in the past and will discuss again, by going through forgiveness processes and cleaning up our past, reducing, if not eliminating, the pain, we become more adoptable. We can adopt a broader range of people, be there for them rather than our own best interest. They sense that and begin to succumb to our desire for them. I mean, that's really kind of what's happening. This is a great salesmanship when you can become very adoptable, which means that's a double entendre. You got to adopt people, therefore become adoptable.
Absolutely.
Very, very powerful concept. We squeaked in behavioral management, and I use that term to kind of take a careful look at attitude control. First of all, I don't think we control attitude. We can manage it, perhaps, influence it. I've heard too often that attitude is everything, that it's the key to success. And on the surface it seems to be, but I think we've discussed before that I've known a lot of people with great attitudes didn't do anything. And on the other hand, I've never seen anyone who behaved well who didn't do well.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
I remember years ago there was a fellow named Bill Charnquist, a really dear friend and mentor and inspiration to me. And frankly, he was a curmudgeon. In other words, Bill did not have a great attitude. We had to keep him away from the other salespeople. He'd talk him out of the business. That he would grouse about the price and the product and the process and everything. And yet, he always did very well because he behaved well. It didn't matter what he thought about it, but he just did the right job. And the world is filled with people who go to their jobs, their offices and what have you, and behave well all day, regardless of what's happening underneath. You know what I mean? That seething that's going on. I've had actual managers tell me that, look, if you're not up, don't go out. Because you're not going to do well anyway. Your attitude's got to be right in order to be successful, and that's not true.
Well, it seems to me that you'd spend a lot of time worrying and being preoccupied with how you feel.
Exactly.
Instead of engaging in the activities and the behaviors that get results.
Yes. And we know that if you're there and that if you care, even to a degree, that is going to gain most of the productivity you're going to have anyway. And so I think that's important.
Well, now there's a saying that you have, something about purposeful behavior as opposed to attitude. Can you quote that for our audience? I love it.
Well, only that I don't exactly know what you mean, but purposeful behavior is where love is involved. Anytime the word purpose is employed, love is the base of purpose. It acknowledges the need to prepare and to apply ourselves, and that we're in the process of making a contribution. That's whenever you're on purpose. And so purposeful behavior is ultimate behavior. I mean, if you're on purpose, everything gets easier. I mean, you have a reason to be where you are and to do what you're doing and to do it well. We spent quite a bit of time on presentation. And that was stressing, of course, that materials should be neat and not dog-eared and coffee-stained. But that goes without saying. But then we talked somewhat about scripting. And I believe I told a Judy Garland story and some of these things. But the fact is that script is terribly, terribly important for a powerful communication. I know we've done 57, this is a 58th show, I believe. And though it's unscripted per se, and we haven't rehearsed it, I don't think I've said a word that I haven't said 1,000 times before in the last 20, 30, and 40 years. And so we live with script. As a matter of fact, when I go away from script, I seem to lose composure, revert back, make a lot of mistakes, even stutter more than I normally do. And that's another issue we've talked about in the past. But we did spend quite a bit of time last week on dress, on clothing, and the impact that can have, and how many mistakes that we make by trying to be faddish or even fashionable. That it goes beyond that. And in our presentation with clothes, what we're really up to is to quiet and assuage the subconscious mind, to not give it distractions, to divert it so that we can communicate with it. And this is terribly important. I think we had focused primarily on men's dress and had begun to get into the women's and don't know how far we got with it. Do you remember my talking about shoes and nail polish and this kind of thing? Did we get into that?
Just to a small degree.
Yeah. There was one issue I know that someone that I had talked to reminded me that I hadn't talked about high fashion. The fact that, I know it sounds odd to some people, that if you're going to wear red shoes, you should have on red hose. You know what I mean? The hose should always match the shoe. But today I saw a young woman come out of a business complex who essentially was dressed in high fashion, and it was all cream. Now she had cream shoes, cream hose, a cream skirt, cream jacket. I mean, and just a dash of color at the neck with a scarf, and I mean, it's pretty impressive. Pretty impressive. Yeah. But it's close to being high fashion. That's where everything is exactly the same. Otherwise, a lot of the codes that apply for men's clothing would apply.
We did discuss that in detail, and we talked about men's hose should match their shoes.
Right.
And I do think that makes a difference for women. The purpose, again, is to communicate effectively, and it seems that if we have too many colors, too much jewelry, too many other things going on, the listener or the communicator's attention is distracted. So again, when you're dressing all in one color, it tends to bring the focus up to the face. I think it makes a big
face
difference.
and hands, and this is what we communicate with. But it's time consciousness, integrity, behavioral management, adaptability, presentations, and I want to spend quite a bit of time on this one thing, accountability. Now typically, the viewer who's watching us who has a job, a place to go to work, an office, or just any place, they're being held accountable. In other words, if they arrive late and quit early and take long breaks and really aren't doing the job, is going to become very apparent. But what we're trying to do here is to assist salespeople who are, frankly, out there in the world on their own. In other words, I know the feeling. You take away all the barriers, there's no clock to punch, and it's real easy to start late and quit early. You know what I mean? It's real easy to drive around and not be effective. And the subconscious mind doesn't make a very good boss. It's perfectly content hiding out in that mobile can, you know, doing sightseeing.
Yes.
You know what I mean? We talk about the wandering that salespeople do by going from one place to another. The star salesman who starts in one part of the city and goes north, and then to the, you know, the southeast, and then the northwest, and so on. That makes them a star salesman.
They're keeping busy, but they're not accomplishing their goals.
Yeah. And so, accountability is a problem. Because the subconscious doesn't do it well. We really don't have a boss. We may have a manager who tries to get us to keep records and what have you, but that's painful. You mean, to be accountable to someone who is going to influence whether you continue or not is demeaning in a way to a salesperson, and it's very hard to be accountable to your family. Well, I know one of the first things that I coach spouses on is when they have a member of their family going into selling. There's one thing they should not do, is that when that member comes home in the evening, okay, the terrible question is what? What did you sell?
Right.
That's not a good question. And yet it's the normal thing to ask. How did you do? What did you sell? Did you make any money? You know, this kind of thing. And the thing of it is, if they did, if they were successful, you'll be the first to know.
Absolutely.
Okay? And if they didn't, maybe they shouldn't discuss it with someone other than who can make a contribution to them and to coach and counsel them through that process. However, I'm sympathetic with the spouse because, frankly, I've seen good relationships diminish when one of the other people got into selling, especially if the other one had a job. You know?
Really?
Oh,
Why
yeah.
is that?
Well, there's sort of a jealousy and avarice that begins to sneak in there. For example, let's say the husband's in selling and the wife has a job. Well, she gets up in the morning at a particular time and readies herself and leaves, okay? And she has to be there on time. And when she leaves, why, he's still getting ready or maybe still watching the news, okay? And she'll come home in the evening after working hard all day, and he's back at the house watching Oprah Winfrey or something. How did I know she was on at that time? Okay, yeah. But anyway, and after a while, he's talking about all the wonderful people he's met and the good times that he's had, and he's been in a suit all day and driving a nice car and moving
Taking
around the
people
city.
to lunch.
Yeah, boy, that just drives you nuts, you know. And you don't think they're working. I had a friend of mine, Jim Channel, years ago, whose marriage faltered and failed because of this very thing. She just couldn't convince herself that he had a job. She said, "Why don't you go to work?" And he was making good money selling encyclopedia. You know what I mean? It's just that most of it was in the evening, you know, and he was able to play golf and go to an occasional film because it wasn't very productive during the day. But it just drove her nuts. And even though he was making a good income, why, finally she just tired of it. I don't know what is she tired of, but it was, I think, that this thing that we're talking about. And another friend, Ben Campbell, I think I've mentioned him before in the show, and his wife was having a lot of difficulty. And I said, Ben, what you got to do is give her the figures. I mean, take account. Now, know what you're doing all day and show her the figures. I initiated contact with 62 people today. Boy, that's kind of, you know, awesome.
Yeah,
and I actually got to talk to 40 people, and out of those 40 people, there was 7 of them who were really interested in my product, and I showed it to 2, and I sold or enrolled 1. You see, well, that seemed to satisfy her, and it really made a big difference in their relationship.
It was probably a value to him as well.
Oh, absolutely.
To recap what he had done and to feel the success of all the purposeful behavior he had engaged in.
See, there's one thing that we talk a lot about in sales and what have you, and that's discipline, self-discipline, drive, ambition, desire. And it walks right past the very thing that seems to make the difference out here, and that's the initiative factor, the big if, I call it. You know what I mean? The initiative factor. And frankly, it's something that's been trained out of most of us. In other words, from the time we were children, we've been told what to do next. Our lives have been pretty well structured by family, circumstances, and society. For example, a little child is told when to eat and when to get up and when to go to bed, and then they go to school and the teacher takes over. This is when we study math, this is when we do recess, now you go home and mother takes over again. You know, you're pretty well accommodating.
Often, it seems like even in school, if you pick up your pencil to start before the teacher's done explaining, you're punished for starting too fast.
Exactly.
And the same at home. So.
Or getting outside the line.
Right,
All
right.
kinds
So
of
you're
things.
waiting constantly for someone else to tell you if it's appropriate or not, or to have permission. And it becomes very difficult to do anything without permission.
Then you get a job same way. They tell you when to
Yes.
start, when to leave.
Absolutely.
And then you go in the military and it really gets serious. But seriously, a person does that all their lives, and all of a sudden they're in sales and someone says, you've got an opportunity. All the doors are open to you, go for it, and it's pretty difficult. And so you get out there and you wonder what to do. And so the initiative factor, the way I define that, is a developed capacity, because that has to be developed. It has to be practiced, because it's not a natural thing anymore. It's been taken away from us. And so it's a developed ability to flow to and do what has to be done toward the fulfillment of your task, regardless of what did or didn't happen yesterday, or what might or might not happen tomorrow.
I think that's also applicable for college students and other people where it doesn't matter if you show up to class or not.
Oh,
they're still
yeah.
charging you for the semester.
Yep.
And I think that it's easy as an 18-year-old or even a 26-year-old to go to school, to go to college, and to get lost in the flow, and suddenly it's midterm or the end of the semester and you have 50 projects due and you haven't studied and everything's all coming down at
Overwhelming.
once. So I think that there are many applications in our life for this. Taking initiative.
The initiative thing, and to do it in small incremental moments, and everything gets easier for you. There's no question. The accountability, one of the things that I'm going to take some time to do, and like I say, those who are in the industry will know exactly what I mean. The only way that you can really get in command of this is with statistics. So everyone is looking for security. Now, I think we might have talked about this before, but everyone wants security. In the business world, when you're in business for yourself, or in sales, security is stability. And what I mean by this is that you're doing essentially the same things every day, just like the rest of the world does. People would have jobs do about the same things every day, and you and I have to do the same thing. But the only way that we know that we are doing that is with statistics. Statistics. Security is stability is statistics. If a person at the end of a year knows the statistics, they will have a criteria for their success. They will know what needs tweaking, what needs adjusting, what they need to develop.
And I think that's one thing that is so scary about sales and other professions, where it's difficult to measure how much of a result each activity you engage in is, how much value there is in that behavior. And it's so easy, like you said, to be the productive salesman. You drive all over the city making calls on people, but are you really being productive? What questions did you ask during those calls? What results did you get? What kind of information did you find out? How much more likely is your customer to buy the product after you visited them, if you're building a relationship or a long-term account? And it's hard to know which behaviors to engage in. It's just as easy to drive around or to shuffle the same papers back and forth, or to sharpen your pencils. So how do people determine what behaviors get results?
The only way they know is with this. I have a thing that I developed some years ago called an initiative journal. And I will tell you, Gina, I've never seen anyone in these years that I've used it who employed it who did not excel. It's magical. It really is. And it seems almost foolishness at first, because what we're saying is this. You have your day in front of you. You have activities that must be engaged in. And if you do them naturally, you tend to function, stop periodically, and take a glance back and say, how am I doing? And oftentimes disappointed. And you just sort of brace yourself and say, okay, now I'm going to do it now. Tomorrow?
Right,
and tomorrow gets bigger and bigger and bigger. Pretty soon you can't handle it anymore. So what we do is to say, okay, you have a process that you're engaged in, and let's just say, for example, a person is going to be phone prospecting, has to make a lot of phone calls. If you don't know what time you're going to get started, you may not get started. In other words, there should be a specific time when you're going to start, and there should be a specific number that you're going to call. Okay? And so that puts you in the trinity of esteem. As you know where you're going to be. Okay, you get into the moment and in the present, and that's a very powerful place. At 9 o'clock, and what I'm saying is at exactly 9, not 9:01 or 5 minutes till, but exactly 9 o'clock, if you have a number and you punch it out, take a check on how you feel. It's really quite impressive. I mean, who could ask anything more of you at that moment? So you dial a phone number, and when you dial that number, there's going to be a consequence. Okay? Now, what's the least thing that can happen after you dial the number? What's the least thing that can happen that you could probably manage okay?
No one home.
No one home. That was a no contact. In other words, no contact could be a busy signal. It could be a machine that you don't want to leave a message on. It could be a child or, a servant at the home or any number of things. But there's no contact. Disconnect, whatever. Think of it as, did it take time and energy to do that?
Yes.
Even though it's a no contact. It took time and energy and a little bit of courage.
Absolutely.
And so that's a chunk of your life. That's a chunk of your life, and I think we should take credit for it just by making a tally mark. Now, how long does it take to make the tally mark? I mean,
a second,
yeah, nothing. However, this is the beginning of a very successful process. You dial another number, and there's no contact. You make another check mark. Now, what's the worst possible thing that could happen? Say you dial the phone number, what's the worst thing that can happen that you could probably manage okay if you think about it?
Well, they said, we don't want any.
Well, you're kind. I'll tell you. If someone said, where did you get my number? Why are you calling here? Get off the phone. Don't call again. They slam the phone down. I call that a brush off, okay? Now, did that take some time and energy and some courage? I think so.
Absolutely.
I think so. And so what you should do is make a mark. Now, when you make the mark, there's something that I suggest that is so powerful, it's frightening. There is... It's called psychic posturing. Some weeks ago we were talking about psychic posturing, you remember. And it's predetermining how you're going to feel after every experience. Okay, in other words, when I hang up that phone, I'm going to feel sympathy or empathy or gratitude. Okay, now those are the choices I've given myself. This is behavioral management. Okay, so someone is inappropriate, unkind, and insensitive. Granted, there are some people that thought that I might be by even calling. But what I'm up to is to make a difference in that person's life, to enrich, enliven, enhance, educate, to inform, something. And so for some reason they weren't able to receive me. They weren't aware of what I was doing, that I was there to be appropriate, and so they were inappropriate, that is. Okay. And so I can sympathize by thinking, my gosh, something must have happened in that person's life to cause them not to be able to receive me. Okay? I'm still in a love mode. I'm still okay, so now I can go to my next phone call. Okay? By the way, why would we keep a record on such a negative thing?
Well, it's time, like you said, it's time and energy out of your life.
Time and energy?
You're accounting for what you've done.
Okay. Another bit of good news, too. If you keep record of these, after a while you begin to realize that there are so few that it's not worth considering. But if you don't keep a record of them, okay, they multiply.
Yes.
Yeah, they're little rascals.
Absolutely.
Yeah, it's just like that's what's overwhelming. One brush off a day can ruin a whole day.
Right. And the good results seem to kind of dwindle.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
I don't know why that is, but it's
happens.
true. Keep a record. Now, something else that might occur is that you encounter someone on the phone who obviously is busy and preoccupied. The kindest thing we can do is to say, oops, sounds like I might have caught you at a bad time. Let me get away and call another day. Not to linger and say, what time can I call you back and what have you. They're preoccupied. And so I call that like a check back. Did it take time and energy and courage?
Absolutely.
Yes, it did. And so I take a record for it. Dial another number, no contact. Okay, dial another number, or by the way, every time I have a contact, I'm going to be empathetic in that case. I empathize with their condition. I let them go and proceeded to the next number, and now I get a chance to communicate with someone.
They'll listen to you.
Yeah, I don't get anywhere, but I communicate. They know what I'm up to, and they've evaluated it, and they're not interested, and so I communicate. So that's the highest level that I can take credit for, that, and I'm gratified by the experience. Okay, so I dial another number. Okay, and this time I have reason to want to call back. They have to accumulate some information, check with someone. I have to get some information for them, and so I make a check mark, and I'm gratified by that experience. Or I might make an appointment. I'm certainly gratified by that experience. I make another call, get another brush off, make another call, this kind of thing. So I communicate with someone else. I better make that too. And all of a sudden it's 10 o'clock. and I draw the line, okay? Put 10, and I go, okay, 10 to 11, here I come, and I do it again. Now, what happens, first of all, there's a lot of things that occur here. First of all, we go back and we add up these, okay? And we keep a record, and that's a pretty good hour, by the way. If you talk 6, 7 people an hour, you're doing a pretty good job.
Absolutely.
Now, if you keep doing this, after a while, you develop a criteria. After a while, you're going to have volume and sales and profit and what have you, and so you can go back and actually determine that every time you pick up a phone, even if no one answers, you've made $1.25. I've had acquaintances of mine in the past who, every time they dialed a phone, they knew they were making $2.75, $5, $7. It makes it a whole lot easier to pick up a phone.
Absolutely.
Because you really begin to get in tune with the fact that the process is giving you the results. If you're so connected with the results, you may not even do any of this because you don't know where you can call to get it.
It becomes more of a lottery approach.
Yes.
You're just waiting for the big spin instead of realizing that you're going through the steps that get you.
And this is one way of being incredibly accountable. I'm also concerned about people finding people they can be accountable to and with. Have you ever heard of Toastmastering? You know, it's this group where they can go and learn how to speak. And by the way, I mean...
Which is one of the most difficult things for people.
Oh, yeah. And when you join Toastmasters, you join a group of people who are there to learn how to speak, so it's a pretty safe environment. And have you ever been in Toastmasters?
I haven't, actually.
I have to urge you to take a crack at it.
I've heard such good things, and there are chapters around the country, so wherever you are, you can...
I've never known
sign
anyone
up
who went to
there.
Toastmaster who didn't accelerate their career.
Oh, I've heard so many people say that they
exception.
would rather die than have to speak publicly. But
a major fear.
Nevertheless, we're called on to speak many times during our lives.
Fellow with the money is the fellow who's with the crayon. You're doing all the marks. You know. Gina, we're rapidly running out of time here. There are some things about accountability that I want to continue with, and so if our viewer will kind of stay with us and wait till next week. Oh, and by the way, we can't say next week at the same time, because if you tune in, you're going to be a half hour late. And so it's next week, approximately half an hour earlier than what you've
Prior
seen
to this time.
Because I've had people call in and say, "Yeah, I keep catching the last part of your show." You know,
They're taking you literally, Bern.
Yeah, why don't you? Yeah, they say same time next week, and they do, and it doesn't work. I want to get into a little bit more a thing I'm going to call task mastering, and something that I would urge people who really care about their future get themselves involved in, and they have complete influence. Meanwhile, we have to say that this is Life Talk, and it's about life, living, and making a living. And my name is Bern.
Moses.
Thank you, Gina.
Thank you, Bern.
Bye-bye.